Hi everybody, Rob with Landscapes Construction and Inspections by Rob. Also ask Rob to be home savvy on YouTube. Been a while since we've been out here and doing a project, but time to get back at showing you guys a few tasks that we're up to. I have a customer that has a leak in their toilet. We have diagnosed it down to a tank to bowl gasket and a little washer in the back of that. We'll show you some details along the way here of what we're going to do. So let's get into this real quick. I've assembled some of the products that we're going to need to get into this project. Some basic hand tools to take the toilet apart. We're going to do a wax ring replacement. We are using one of these type wax rings. We think it's a good product to use. Your favorite hand towels. We're using a liquid lock, which is actually going to turn the water in the toilet to a gel. Pair of gloves, of course, you're going to want those. And any parts that you're going to need to reassemble the tank to bowl when you actually put that back together. So let's get at it. Okay, well, it's time to get at it. We've assembled some basic hand tools that we need. Of course, you need a flat screwdriver, some sort of an adjustable wrench. I like my channel locks and our liquid to turn things into jelly. Apply product into the toilet. Let it sit for a minute and we'll come back to it, and it'll actually be jello in the bottom of the actual tank. So when we take the tank up, it doesn't splash and move all over the place. And then later on, after we reassemble it, we can set it in place, fill the toilet with water and flush it, and down it goes and goes back into liquid again. Simple enough. Okay, so one step that we fixed or didn't do before we actually started the whole process and poured the powder into the actual bottom of the tank was that we made sure that the water was off and the tank was actually empty before we started the process, because we need to replace and take this part apart. So now that this has turned to jello, it's all crystallized in gelatin, we can now take our hose off the back of the toilet with our water shut off, and we can remove the actual toilet from the floor, because we're going to replace the wax seal as part of this process. Not that it's required of this part, but it's one of those things the customers also asked us to check and make sure is okay, because there was a leak noted below, but it's all water that has gone down through and under the floor. And we're just checking for any other problems from this. So here goes. Okay, so here we are into the next part of doing this. We have disassembled the back. We have taken apart the tank itself. We've replaced the rubber gasket on the bottom between the tank and where it'll sit on top of the bowl. Also, we've replaced the bolts and the gaskets that are inside the actual tank itself. Now, unfortunately, we ran into a little bit of a plumbing glitch when we were doing this. We had a pipe that was older and broke off in the wall, so we had to do a little bit of a plumbing repair. Now that we're back on track again, we can now assemble the actual tank. We replace the washers and the gaskets down the bottom where the actual screws are as they come through the tank. Most of your gasket sets come with bolts and gaskets and instructions on the back of them, so look into them, because every toilet's going to be a little bit different. So specifically, I'm not going to talk about yours. We're just going to talk about the one that we're working on. You're going to want to make sure that you got a nice square set on that. When that gasket's on there, there's a nut underneath here. Make sure that flange is up and flush, and then it's square, so when it sets on this, it makes a seal. This one has an additional piece in the back. We're going to line everything up. Set them down in there. If it wobbles a little bit, it means you've got enough height between the top of the two of them. Make sure that all of your gaskets are lined up where they're supposed to go. Sometimes you have to save some of the old hardware, because some of the kits don't come with all of the hardware needed to reassemble. Now the bolts on the bottom of this, remember you're screwing into a glass porcelain set. You don't want to over torque them or tighten them too much so that you crack something. You want them good and snug, a little bit tighter than hand tight, and then tight enough that it pulls the actual tank down to the top of the bowl. So we'll get this tightened up here. We'll put on our water line. We'll check all our fittings, make sure we have no leaks. We're only going to turn it on. When we turn it on, we're only going to put a little bit of water in it, so that in case we do have a leak, we can take it apart with minimal water in the tank. Okay, so now that that's tightened, we have chosen at this time to go ahead and replace the actual line going between the shutoff and the actual tank. Now is a good time to do that and upgrade any of your old lines if it has been a while since the last time you did this. Most of your new lines and fittings come with decent rubber gaskets on them, so they really only have to be hand tightened or a little bit more than snug with a wrench. So again, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of water to the actual tank so we can check for any leaks. Okay, so we filled the tank about halfway up full. You want to check the bolt connections underneath to make sure that you don't have any water there. Now the gasket that we replaced between the actual tank and the actual bowl itself, you won't be able to check and see if there's actually a leak there until you actually flush the toilet. Now remember, we did put a gelatin in here that has now, because we've added some water, has returned back to liquid again. So we're going to give a good filling of the tank. Now that we know that we have no leaks for the basic, for the bolts, and now we want to go ahead and check the actual seal between the tank and the actual bowl itself. Once that's done, we can go ahead and put this all back together and wrap things up. Okay, so the tank's all full of water. Let's give her a flush. We're checking for a leak between here and the very base of the tank. The toilet flushed the way it's supposed to. There's no water leaking out at the base of the floor because we did replace the wax seal on this. We wanted to make sure we check that connection also. Now to finish up, we're going to reassemble the rest of the toilet, put the rest of the pieces back in the back, and also caulk it to the floor. It's a good recommendation to put a caulk line around the actual bead of the toilet. I always leave the very back of the toilet uncaulked. It's also the hardest place to get anyways, but it allows it, if it does leak, to leak out there and actually show you there's an actual leak. So it's kind of a little bit of a plumber's trick at the same time. My preference, some people like to caulk all the way around it, but again, I leave the very back open so that it does leak, we can check it. We have the ceiling out down below because there was a plumbing leak, and we're actually going to do some drywall repair and some things like that. But other than that, thanks for watching, and we're going to get cleaned up here and go on to the next project.